Welcome. My name is Natasha Sherman, and I am your host. And my guest today is Jeffrey Deskovic. I've interviewed Jeffrey a number of times, and I'm thrilled to have him back here. And I'd like to start out by telling you a little bit about his story. So at the age of 17, he was wrongfully convicted in 1990 of raping, beating, and strangling a 15-year-old high school classmate. After hours of interrogation, being lied to, given an illegal lie detector test, Jeffrey, after 7 grueling hours of a 16-year-old boy, Jeffrey made a false confession based on the information that the police fed to him. And by the police officer's own testimony, by the end of the interrogation, as Jeffrey says, I was on the floor crying uncontrollably in what was described as the fetal position. During the time Jeffrey was in prison, the person who actually committed the crime killed a mother of 2. Jeffrey served 16 years in prison. And after a new DA was elected, Jeffrey gained the support of the Innocence Project, and he was exonerated and released in 2006. Since then, he's been on a mission, and I'm happy to say, and so proud of him, he passed the New York bar this summer. So welcome, Jeffrey.
Thanks for having me yet again. I think this is my 5th appearance. It's awesome.
Yes. And oh my God, what a thrilling story, because we hear so many gloom and doom stories, and they're real. And it's not that there isn't a gloom and doom aspect or pit of despair aspect to this, but, here you are all these years later, and you took that experience and you didn't allow it to crush you. You got monies as a result of wrongful conviction, and you used that to create the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice. And as I was talking to you before, in the beginning, you didn't get monies immediately, and you became a starving student, like you were determined, and it, took years of that. I think the thing that I want people to get, besides your success story, like really what you're up to and what we need to be paying attention to, is the shattering aspect of wrongful convictions. Shatter people's lives, families' lives, peripherally, and even in society. So the man who originally committed the crime that you were convicted of went out and murdered a mother of 2. I mean, the ripple effect of that, should be around the world. And yet we have so many wrongful convictions. So here you are now. Talk about your mission, what we need to be paying attention to, and what you're working on.
Sure. So my mission is to free wrongfully convicted people and to prevent wrongful convictions in the first place by means of policy changes. So that's, in terms of that, just to put a little color on that, so my foundation has been able to free 7 people in 6 years.
Wow. Oh my God, that's amazing. And you work with people not necessarily just with DNA evidence.
Right, that's right. That's right.
A lot of people just will do that for just if there's DNA evidence.
Correct, because DNA is only available in 5 to 12% of the cases, but we do DNA and non-DNA cases. And point of fact, none of the 7 people's cases that we were able to help them regain their freedom, none of those cases involved DNA.
And what was the longest period of incarceration that any of them had been in?
23 and a half years.
Yeah. So congratulations.
Thank you. So in terms of things to pay attention to, the winds of criminal justice reform are blowing quite strongly, both generally as well as in the area of wrongful conviction. So we were able to pass several laws in New York. So we recently had the country's first Oversight Commission for Prosecutors passed in New York.
So tell us what that means, because
Yes.
that sounds like so timely.
Right.
Or about time.
Yeah, of course. Right. Well, both.
Yes.
Yes. So previously, the prosecutors really had no oversight. There's the Bar Association, there's a grievance committee, totally ineffective, and none of the prosecutors are ever disciplined. So we were able to pass the Oversight Commission, which was independent. They have subpoena power, they have the expertise, complaints can be anonymous. So lots of great stuff. And they can recommend a range of punishments from a censure all the way up to removal of office. So that will have deterrent effect.
I'm going to interrupt you here because,
Yes.
My visceral reaction is they should go to jail.
Right.
And again,
I
it's
agree.
not that some people make mistakes.
Right.
But some of them It really was. They knew that they were forcing a confession. They knew that they were setting you up. This idea of, we have to find somebody to pin it on. Looks like it could be him, so let's just go for it. And then the unwillingness to retract or to admit to their mistakes. They've taken years away from your life. They've taken years away from people's lives. And again, mistakes are one thing, but just doing it without any ethical concern is another thing. Personally, I think they should go to jail.
I agree. Well, the state of California agrees with you too. Since last time we were here, so the state of California has made it an e-felony for a prosecutor to withhold evidence of innocence. So when they do things like that, and when they make inflammatory remarks or improper, try to admit evidence that's not supposed to be admitted, that's clear cut, that's intentional, that's no mistake at that point.
Yes.
So the commission, is twofold. So purpose. So firstly, it would give people who've been wronged a place to go to for redress. And secondly, the hope is that it will be a deterrence also, that it will give them a reason to pause in committing misconduct. So that's one change. And another change is discovery reform was passed. So that means the exchange of information between the defense and the prosecution. So typically, many people were pleading guilty without ever knowing the evidence against them. And when people would go to trial, there would be a pile of documents dumped on a defense attorney's desk on the eve of trial. And now that's
proving
no more.
that the person is innocent.
Whether that or even just the evidence against your client in
so
general.
That you could,
so that you can put together a theory of defense. You could prepare lines of cross-examination. What is your strategy? You could investigate. But if you're given a very limited amount of time, which is what was happening, it's very difficult to do. And even then, you would only get information about witnesses the prosecution decided that they're going to call, not everyone else. It was not, no. But now the discovery reform, which was passed, will make that will make that illegal. So that's the whole theory of having the commission, is that the commission can enforce the new discovery law.
That's great.
Hence passing that one. So those two things. But then the coalition group, which I'm part of, It Can Happen to You, which my foundation is part of that bigger coalition group. So we're working nearby here in Pennsylvania. So we're trying to bring the commission there. But we're also working in Pennsylvania on compensation, because PA is one of the 23 states that has no compensation, and expungement. So people right now in Pennsylvania who've been exonerated in court, they still have a criminal record, even if they've been exonerated in court. Isn't that bizarre?
And that follows them everywhere.
That follows them everywhere, hurts employment opportunities, amongst other things. But we're also working in California to bring the commission out there also. And again, we're working on compensation there. So they have compensation in place. But check this out, Natasha. To get compensated in California, the legislature has to pass a private bill each time. Could you imagine what the rigmarole involved in that? And even then, it comes out to $140 a day, which is nothing. So we're working on those. So, but the idea, though, of doing work and policy work in other states and putting statewide coalitions together, to me, is very, very exciting. So I think all the bills that are out there pertaining to different wrongful conviction prevention measures and bills pertaining to other issues, mass incarceration, solitary confinement, college education for prisoners, ban the box, so you don't have to tell would-be employers of your criminal record until a job offer has been made. So that's another issue that's being looked at. Alternatives to incarceration now, elderly people in prison. So all these issues are gaining some currency in society and gaining some measure of support amongst the elected officials in different states. So passage of changes for these are possible now.
I read, I think on your website, approximately 120,000 wrongfully convicted people in prison.
Right.
In this country?
Yes, in this country.
120,000.
Yes, there was news articles. There was a couple of news articles on that. I didn't invent that stat, and I want to share that there is a Wayne State University study that estimates 10,000 people are wrongfully convicted each year.
So statistics are statistics, but if you think of the significance of your own life and
I didn't graduate. high school. I missed the prom. I
Yeah.
didn't do education at a more traditional age. I missed a lot of the rites of passage, births, deaths, weddings, holidays, possibly a
And
family.
while all of that you're missing, you're also living in a hellhole.
Correct. It is a
Okay.
hellhole in there. Yes.
So you think that, each of us values our life, and every day we want positive experiences. We're always avoiding painful experiences, and you think that approximately 120,000 and people have been wrongfully convicted and put to death.
Right.
And that this exists. I mean, it is time for things to change.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I want to add an additional aspect is when you send the wrong person to prison, you also send their family. So
Yes.
that's another aspect of the ripple
Yes.
effect too.
Yes, absolutely. And again, going back to, and the guilty party is out there.
The guilty party's out there. In my case, the actual criminal killed, as you mentioned, a second
Yeah.
victim
Yeah.
who was a school teacher and had 2 children. But that often happens that the actual perpetrator commits other crimes.
Yes, if they did it once, chances are good they'll do it again. And
Sure.
meanwhile, somebody else is paying the price, and meanwhile, society is paying the price as well because they go out and commit other crimes. So the thing is, I know that one of the things I want to invite people, you're a nonprofit,
Yes.
and at the end, we're going to put up information on how people can contribute because this, as you say, it can happen to you.
Yes.
And this impacts all of us
Yes.
because it costs us to not only live in a society where this can happen, that's not the kind of society most of us want to live in, just
Right.
even philosophically.
Right.
But it does impact us, and it impacts taxpayer dollars, and it impacts us on a psychological level. So I invite people to do that. So tell me about some of the cases you're working on.
So one of them is Andrew Krivak. So his conviction was recently overturned after 23 years in prison. So the same polygraphist who coerced the false confession out of me did the same thing. Did the same thing to Andy. The crazy thing about that case is that there's a ton of evidence to an alternative suspect who was a serial rapist who admitted to committing the crime to a prisoner while he was locked up for a sex offense he did commit. And his co-defendant, Anthony DePippo, has been home for the last 3 years, listed in the National Registry of Exonerations, and compensated by the state. And this is the person who he's alleged to have committed the crime. So one man is out and another man is in on exactly the same set of facts, with the exception that Anthony DePippo did not give a coerced false confession, but Krivak did.
So is this polygraphist in jail?
He is not. No, he's never been
Is he
arrested.
still operating?
No, he's not. He retired. But he still has his pensions. He's never faced any kind of professional, criminal, or any other type of penalties. I did sue him,
Right.
and I prevailed, but that was as to the municipality that he worked for. Nothing ever happened to him personally.
And that's, to me, is shocking. You know, there's this whole thing about in law enforcement and all of that, you know, we're a brotherhood and all of that. But yeah, but you don't support someone who's committing crimes just because they're part of the same brotherhood. I mean, what does
Right.
that say about you?
Right, I agree with that. So I make that very point. So I am certified as an instructor in police academies here in New Jersey, actually.
Wow.
And yeah, so I've spoken to the cadets when they're near graduation on morals and ethics, and I talk about best practices. And I do make that point that, you know, we need the honest cops to, you know, blow the whistle and force the dishonest ones out of your
Yeah,
profession.
because why would you want to be lumped in with them and have
Right.
them reflect on you?
Correct. Yeah, exactly. When the cops become the criminals, that's very, very scary, and the ramifications for that are very serious.
And to some degree, I mean, we have to admit, to some degree, in any organization, there are going to be people who are breaking the law, who are doing all the wrong things. And what we tend to do is sweep it under the carpet. I think, and again, this may be a politically incorrect thing to say, but it's what the church did, you know, swept a
Sure.
lot of stuff under the
Yes.
rug. So that's one alternative, but why would you not just say, oh my God, we are so sorry. This is not who we are. This is not who we want you to perceive us as, and they will have their day in court, you know? But somehow there's this mentality of, no, we can't fess up to anything because it makes us all look bad. No, not fessing up makes you look bad.
That's right. It makes it look like it's acceptable.
Yes, yes. So tell me again about this case. So here he is. The judge says...
yeah, the conviction is overturned.
But he's back in jail.
Well, he never left. He never got out. So
Because
the prosecution, not wanting to admit an error, has appealed the judge's decision to a higher court. So that's in process. But in the meantime, the same judge who overturned the conviction, he denied bail. So normally an appeal takes about a year.
And in your case, there was one appeal you made, and it was denied because, not because it was invalid, but because it was a few days late.
Yes, I was 4 days late in federal court.
How does that make sense?
It really doesn't. I feel like there's this maddening emphasis on proceduralism rather than substantive justice. It should have only been about, all right, is Deskovic's claims legit,
yes,
or is it not?
Yes.
Not, is he here a couple of days late? That's so far removed from what's supposed to be the bedrock principle that the guilty are punished and innocent go free.
And it sounds to me that that's kind of pervasive, right?
It does. It is pervasive. Yes, it is.
You don't get your form in on time? Oops, too bad.
Well, that happened to Terence Lewis. Now, Terence Lewis was exonerated after I think it was 21 years and 5 months, and nearby in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia specifically. And the federal court, when they rejected his claim, they ruled that he was likely innocent, but that the objection by the Philadelphia then district attorney on procedural grounds was technically correct, and therefore they were denying to release him.
Because he hadn't gotten it in on time?
It had to do with the filing deadline under the AEDPA
right.
Act. Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, but I mean, you would think that the state courts would have then remedied that, but they didn't. And Terence wound up serving another 10 years before District Attorney Krasner became the DA, and he had his conviction review unit. That was one of the cases that they straightened out. But that's another development to talk about, though, is the emergence of conviction review units in district attorney offices where they proactively look for wrongful convictions. So DA Krasner is an example of that. 10 people were exonerated in 20 months.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. Ken Thompson.
That's impressive.
Did 23 cases in 2.5 years. So Craig Watkins, it was more than 40 in Dallas. So these units can produce spectacularly breathtaking results for justice. On the other hand, though, we have to be careful because not every unit is legit. Some of these units are window dressing.
Oh, explain that.
Yeah, so the criteria, so if the well-known innocence claims based on evidence, when those things are rejected or turned down, and when the DA offices are opposed to justice reform measures that would prevent wrongful conviction, those are signs that the unit is not legit. Just like if there is no budget, if the people who work there are not known, if that's not their job, when they hedge on the language. No, we reinvestigate as needed. Or the prosecutor has 2 or 3 other functions that is their normal day of business and the workplace, but instead of doing that, those are all signs that, and when exonerations are happening in jurisdictions over the objection of the district attorney, and you look at what was the evidence the courts relied on to overturn the conviction, and you see that those claims were rejected by the district attorney's unit, well, that's a pretty clear-cut sign that it's a total sham of a unit.
Right. So, are you hopeful?
I am hopeful because the clip of exonerations is fairly high. There is an unprecedented level of awareness of wrongful convictions now with movies, podcasts, documentaries, docuseries, many articles. So that's all helping. So that I am hopeful that way. At the same time, it is disheartening that even now, not wanting to admit the error. In Texas, a man, Rodney Reed, was nearly executed without allowing him to have further DNA testing. It took all these celebrities to come out of the woodwork and, to try to finally stop that.
So there was the possibility that he was innocent.
Yes.
There was DNA evidence
that could be tested, and the Innocence Project was representing him, and they did unearth other evidence. And they still wanted to kill him. And they still wanted to kill him, and that's even while they also found evidence of an alternative suspect who did commit a sex offense and who was a jealous boyfriend of the victim. and who made statements, well, if you ever cheat on me, I'm going to kill you, and then actually confessed to somebody while he was in prison. So all that evidence, and still, so even in this day and age, though, to stop people from getting testing is...
There's this, I don't understand. There again, we seem to operate on the basis of do anything to be right.
Yes.
And not admit that you were wrong.
Right.
What is wrong with being wrong? I mean, you made a mistake.
I agree. I listen, it's human. Admit that. And another thing is, even if you're sure that you're right, I mean, what does it hurt to double check?
Yes, exactly.
Look, why don't you just give people testing, okay? And if it shows they're guilty, all right, you were right. Let's never talk about guilt, innocence anymore in life.
Case, yeah.
In this case. But on the other hand, if you made a mistake, you can free someone, you can correct an injustice, and you can refocus the investigation trying to find actual criminal.
So this case in Texas, the execution was stayed, or
yeah, it was stayed.
Was he proven innocent?
Well, they're getting the testing. They're working on getting the testing now.
So they finally stopped the execution.
They stopped the execution, right? But it got to within I believe it was 7 days. It got to within 7 days, and how many people are going to get Dr. Phil, Kim Kardashian, and Beyonce, and all these other celebrities, to come out for them. Yeah. I mean, there was another case that happened in the same time span, partial overlap, where all the celebrities were not, in fact, on board. And it was the Anthony Cromartie case in Georgia, and he was executed without giving him testing.
It leaves me sad and frightened and discouraged. It's like, yeah. And I think one of the things that's important for people to be informed about the places along the way that go sideways or that can go sideways.
Right. Well, that's why studying wrongful conviction cases, doing like a postmortem and from beginning to end, and identifying every exact place that something went wrong, and then drawing lessons from that, doing things differently, incorporating those things into legislation to mandate the best practices. That's why that's so critical. Yeah. But even with that, again, we don't do that in general. They did that in my case. They've done that in a couple of other select cases. But in general, they don't do that, and we should. I mean, just to put in context, I mean, if there's a train wreck, if there's a plane crash, that happens.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to ask you, it kind of disappeared. Yes, do you want to be in the courtroom?
I do, yes. Yeah, I certainly do. So, we have freed 7 people in 6 years, but I reached the point where I wasn't content to sit in the front row anymore. So I entered law school, and I just graduated Elizabeth Hobbs School of Law at May, and I just passed the bar. So,
amazing.
A few more minor steps to do, then I'll get the law license, and then I'll be a lawyer, and so I will be able to represent some of the people myself, and that's the dream, is to be able to exonerate a few people as an attorney.
So, what cases does your organization take on?
Both DNA and non-DNA.
Right, and you do your due diligence.
Of
you
course.
Don't just take it because they ask, but you look to see if there's really a case there.
Yes, of course, and that has 2 facets. So one facet of that is we determine whether we believe the innocence claim, and number 2, we assess for viability. Do we see a way to win?
Right.
If we don't see a way to win, we can't take the case.
Right.
So I mean, we do have 11 cases that are en route. I'm projecting that we have a possibility of winning between 2 to 4 cases in the next year.
That's amazing. You're saving lives and families.
It is. It's very meaningful coming from where I came from, because as you know, I got into all this advocacy work from the beginning because I couldn't forget about the people I metaphorically left behind. So it's one of the most exciting things, one of the best feelings in the world when you're able to get somebody out of prison. That's their wrongfully.
Yeah, and you and I were talking about the idea that when you first came out, even the first few years, if somebody said to you, and then you got this compensation, in your mind, you would never have accepted that compensation for the years that you lost in prison, the years of your life, and the experiences that you experienced. And as you say, now you wouldn't necessarily choose that. If somebody said, hey, you want to go for this again? You wouldn't say yes. Right. But you also see how it has now contributed to who you are and the difference that you're making in the world.
Yeah, that's true. So, so it's not that I would trade the years now for the compensation.
Right.
It's instead that the person I've become
yes.
and the accomplishments and making a difference and having the mission in the world and freeing people and being an advocate and the policy changes, if I could erase all of that and go back in time and to just before I was arrested, I would not do that. I would leave everything as is and be the person that I am now. And that's a huge difference between me now and before when we first met, many years ago, actually.
Yeah. So we've got 2 minutes left. What is it you want people to pay attention to, or what message do you have?
I want people to pay attention to people running for office, whether or not the criminal justice reform is on their radar, that they make that part of their campaign. That's huge. I want people to give voice to their elected officials. Hey, we want changes in the justice system to make it more accurate. So those are the most important things. And stop getting out of jury duty. Hold the prosecution to their burden of proof. If they get beyond reasonable doubt, then you vote to convict. And other than that, you're supposed to be voting not guilty.
That's great, Jeff. That's really great. And the thing that you talk about, like public officials running for office and they're, are they committed to change? And I think that's really significant because very often what they spout is, I'm going to be hard on crime. And I think they need to be challenged. What does that actually mean? Are you going to measure that by the number of convictions, whether they're innocent or not? I mean, that kind of sometimes is the driving point. We just got to be able to show them the numbers and people will love us, as opposed to we have to show them accurate numbers. We have to do this and do it well.
Spoken perfectly. And I want to add that, people who have a record of getting something done in justice reform, those are the people I credit. People who are saying it after the fact because they're running for office, I take that with a grain of salt. Okay, let me see what you do when you get in office, but in the meantime, I'm not helping you get there because I don't believe you, frankly.
Yeah, that's really great. Jeff, thank you so much for coming back, and congratulations again for just these Herculean accomplishments. And I kind of look forward to the next couple of years and see what happens.
Me too. If I can add a really fast parting thought, I just want to say for the viewers that no matter what type of challenging obstacles you've overcome or been subjected to in your life, you can still chase your dreams down and make things happen. And I did want to be a lawyer before all this happened, and I still made it happen. So I did it. They can do it.
Yeah, and that's not spoken by someone who's spouting from lack of experience, but from someone who comes from a place where you actually did it.
Yes.
So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
My name is Natasha. Thank you for joining us.